An old man sits by the fire. He has no teeth left except one lonely canine. His tribe feeds him soft food, bone marrow, brain matter. He cannot hunt anymore. He cannot even chew tough meat. But they keep him alive anyway. Why? Because he is human, and humans, even 1.77 million years ago, cared for each other. This old man is Homo erectus, and his skull, found in what is now Georgia, tells us something incredible about this species, something that might actually explain why they were so successful, and also, weirdly enough, why they eventually disappeared. But I am getting ahead of myself. If these help you sleep or relax, subscribe. Where's everyone at? City and time. Last video had Dublin to Dallas, and I spent too long trying to figure out the time zones. So here is what blows my mind about Homo erectus. These folks were around for nearly 2 million years. 2 million. Modern humans have only existed for about 300,000 years. We think we are so special, so advanced, so successful. But Homo erectus outlasted us by like 6 times over. At least so far, I guess we could still make it. They spread from Africa to China to Indonesia to Europe. They survived ice ages. They hunted elephants and rhinos. They invented complex tools. They probably used fire. They maybe even built boats. These were not primitive cave people grunting at each other. These were smart, capable, incredibly adaptable humans. So why did they go extinct? That is the question we are answering today. And honestly, when I started researching this, I thought the answer would be simple. Climate change, or a volcano, or maybe modern humans just outcompeted them. But the real answer is way more complicated and kind of heartbreaking when you think about it. Homo erectus did not fail. They succeeded too well. And that success might be exactly what killed them. Okay, so first things first. When I say Homo erectus was successful, I mean really successful. Like, the most successful early human species ever. No contest. They first appeared about 2 million years ago, maybe a bit earlier. We are not totally sure because the fossil record from that time is, not great. But we have evidence of them in both Africa and Asia almost immediately, which is wild. That means they either evolved super fast and spread like crazy, or maybe they evolved in multiple places at once. Scientists still argue about this, but here is what we know for sure. By 1.9 million years ago, Homo erectus was already in China. By 1.8 million years ago, they were in Indonesia. They reached Europe maybe 1 million years ago, though some sites suggest even earlier. They were everywhere, and they stayed everywhere for ages. Most human species, they pop up, they stick around for a few 100,000 years, then they go extinct or evolve into something else. But Homo erectus just kept going, and going, and going. The latest fossils we have are from Java, dated to about 100,000 years ago. Some researchers think they might have survived even later, but we cannot confirm that yet. That is 1.9 million years of existence. No other human species comes close. So what made them so successful? What was their secret? Well, for starters, they were smart. Not modern human smart, but way smarter than anything that came before them. Their brains averaged about 950 cubic centimeters. For comparison, a chimpanzee brain is about 400. Modern humans are about 1350. So Homo erectus was right in the middle. Pretty decent brain size, honestly. But here is the thing about intelligence. It is not just about brain size, it is about what you do with it. And Homo erectus did a lot. They invented the Herculean hand axe. This was like the Swiss Army knife of the Stone Age. You could cut meat with it, prepare plants, cut wood, maybe even kill animals if you jabbed it into them. These tools were way more complex than anything earlier humans made. They had standardized shapes, they were symmetrical, they required planning and skill to create. And here is what really gets me. We find these hand axes everywhere Homo erectus went. Africa, Europe, Asia, all looking basically the same. That means they either invented the design once and it spread through teaching and migration, or they were smart enough to independently invent the same tool multiple times. Either way, that is pretty impressive. They also hunted big game, like really big game. We find Homo erectus sites with elephant bones, rhino bones, hippo bones. These are not small animals. You cannot just walk up to a rhino and poke it with a stick. You need planning, cooperation, strategy. Multiple people working together with different tools and different roles. That requires communication. Maybe not language as we know it, but definitely some kind of proto-language. They had to coordinate hunts, share food, teach their kids how to make tools. You do not survive 2 million years by grunting randomly at each other. And they probably used fire. The evidence for this is still debated, but we have sites showing controlled use of fire, going back at least 1 million years, probably earlier. Fire is huge. It means cooked food, which means more calories and easier digestion. It means warmth, which means you can survive in colder climates. It means protection from predators. Fire is basically a cheat code for human survival. So you have smart humans with big brains, complex tools, cooperative hunting, fire, and an ability to adapt to nearly any environment on Earth. Tropical Africa, no problem. Cold European winters, they handled it. Island hopping in Indonesia, done. These folks were incredible. But then something happened. Around 100,000 years ago, maybe a bit earlier, they started disappearing. Not everywhere at once, but gradually. First from Africa, then from Europe, then from Asia. By about 100,000 years ago, they were gone, extinct. After nearly 2 million years of success, they vanished. Why? Some people think climate change killed them. About 100,000 years ago, the Earth's climate was shifting pretty dramatically. It was getting colder in some places, drier in others. Homo erectus had survived plenty of climate changes before. But maybe this one was different. Maybe they lost too much of their habitat too quickly. There is some evidence for this. A study from 2020 found that Homo erectus lost more than half of their climate niche around this time. Basically, the environments they were adapted to started disappearing, and maybe they could not adapt fast enough. But I do not think that is the whole story, because other human species were dealing with the same climate changes. Neanderthals survived, early Homo sapiens survived. Why not erectus? Other people think it was competition. By 100,000 years ago, modern Homo sapiens were spreading out of Africa. We were smarter, we had better tools, we had full language, we had more complex social structures. Maybe we just outcompeted Homo erectus for resources, pushed them out of their territories, took over their hunting grounds. This happens in nature all the time. A new species shows up, does things a bit better than the old species, and eventually the old species goes extinct. It is called competitive exclusion, and honestly, it probably played a role. But here is where it gets interesting, and sad. Homo erectus did not just disappear. They got absorbed. Modern humans did not just replace Homo erectus. We interbred with them. just like we interbred with Neanderthals and Denisovans. When Homo sapiens spread out of Africa and encountered these other human species, we did not just fight them or avoid them, we had kids with them. Which means Homo erectus did not really go extinct. Not completely. Their genes are still floating around in us today. Small amounts, sure, but they are there. So in a way, Homo erectus never died. They just evolved into something else. Into us. But that still does not fully answer the question. Why did pure Homo erectus populations disappear? Why did they not survive alongside modern humans like Neanderthals did for a while? I think the answer comes down to something simple, something I hinted at earlier. Homo erectus was too successful. Wait, that sounds backwards, right? How can being successful make you go extinct? But think about it. Homo erectus had been around for nearly 2 million years. They had spread across 3 continents. They had adapted to every environment imaginable. They had perfected their tools and their hunting strategies and their way of life, and that was the problem. They were so well adapted to their specific way of living that when things changed, when competition showed up, when the climate shifted, they could not change fast enough. They were too specialized, too stuck in their ways. Modern humans, we were younger, more flexible. We had language and art and culture and all these things that let us adapt super quickly to new situations. We could invent new tools, try new hunting strategies, move to new environments without waiting for biological evolution to catch up. Homo erectus was like a master craftsman who had spent 2 million years perfecting one skill. We were the young upstarts who could learn anything quickly, and in a changing world, flexibility beats specialization every time. At least that is my theory. Scientists still debate this stuff constantly, and honestly, we might never know the full answer. The fossil record from this time period is just not complete enough. But one thing is certain. Homo erectus was an incredible species. They cared for their elderly. They hunted cooperatively. They made tools that would last them nearly 2 million years. They were human in all the ways that matter, and their story is our story. Because we come from them. They are our ancestors. Their DNA is in us. Their innovations, their tools, their discoveries about fire and cooking and hunting, all of that got passed down through the generations and helped make us who we are today. Now, before we go any further, I need to tell you about how we even discovered these folks in the first place, because it is a pretty wild story. 1891. Indonesia. A Dutch doctor named Eugene Dubois is digging around on the island of Java, and he finds something incredible. A skull cap, part of a thigh bone, a few teeth. At this point in history, the only early human fossils anyone had found were Neanderthals. That was it. People were still arguing about whether Darwin's theory of evolution was even real. The idea that humans came from apes was super controversial. And then Dubois shows up with this skull. It had a brain way bigger than a chimp, but the skull was flat, primitive looking, with these huge brow ridges. The thigh bone proved it walked upright like a modern human. But everything else about it looked ancient. Scientists had no idea what to make of it. Some thought it was a fossil chimpanzee. Others thought it was some kind of missing link between apes and humans. Dubois called it Pithecanthropus erectus, upright ape man. Most people did not believe him. They thought he was making it up or misinterpreting the fossils. It was not until 1921, when more fossils were found in China, that people started taking this seriously. They found Peking man. hundreds of fossils from over 40 individuals in a cave near Beijing, 5 nearly complete skulls, tons of stone tools, evidence of fire use. Suddenly it was undeniable. There was an ancient human species that had lived all across Asia. They were real. Both Java man and Peking man got renamed Homo erectus in 1950, upright man. And ever since then, we have been finding more and more fossils in Africa, in Europe, in Southeast Asia. These folks were everywhere. But here is what gets me. When those first fossils were found, everyone assumed Homo erectus was way more primitive than they actually were. Like, barely human. Just some upright ape that could make basic tools. We were so wrong. Every new discovery has shown us that Homo erectus was way more advanced than we thought. Way more human. That old man I mentioned at the start, the one with no teeth, he lived to be about 40 years old, which was ancient for that time period, and his tribe kept him alive for years after he lost his teeth. They fed him soft foods. They cared for him, even though he could not contribute much to the group anymore. That is compassion. That is empathy. That is humanity. We have found other examples too. A young boy, about 8 years old, who had a spinal condition that would have been incredibly painful. He could barely walk or bend over, but he survived for years. His group took care of him. We have found a child with a serious brain deformity, severe learning disabilities, the kind of condition where the kid would have needed constant care and attention. But the family kept that child alive for at least 5 years. This was not survival of the fittest. This was survival of the most caring. And you know what? I think that is the real secret to Homo erectus success. Not just their big brains or their tools or their fire. It was their ability to care for each other, to work together, to form communities where the strong help the weak and everyone looks out for everyone else. That is what made them human. That is what made them us. But it also might be what made them vulnerable in the end. See, here is the thing about being a caring, cooperative species. It works great when times are good, when there is plenty of food and your group is thriving and everyone can pitch in their own way. But when resources get scarce, when the climate changes, when competition shows up, suddenly those old people and sick kids become a burden, a drain on limited resources. I am not saying Homo erectus stopped caring for each other, but I am saying that in tough times, a species that can adapt quickly and travel light has an advantage, and modern humans, we were really good at that. We were younger, more innovative, more flexible. We could change our strategies on the fly. We did not have 2 million years of tradition holding us back. We were scrappy and adaptable and willing to try new things. And when we showed up, Homo erectus could not compete. It was not their fault. They were not inferior. They were just too set in their ways, too successful at what they did, and when the world changed, they could not change with it. So when we ask why Homo erectus went extinct, maybe we are asking the wrong question. Maybe they did not go extinct at all. Maybe they just became us. Because here is the truth. We do not know exactly how much Homo erectus DNA is in modern humans. We do not have good enough genetic samples from erectus fossils to test it properly, but we know we interbred with Neanderthals. We know we interbred with Denisovans, and Homo erectus was around way longer than either of those species. The math suggests we almost certainly interbred with them too, which means their genes are in us. Their adaptations, their innovations, their 2 million years of survival experience, all of that got passed down to us through the generations. Homo erectus did not fail. They did not lose. They just transformed into something new. Into us. Alright, so now that we have established that Homo erectus was way more human than anyone originally thought, we need to talk about what they actually looked like. Because when you see a reconstruction of Homo erectus, they look different from us, but also kind of the same. It is weird. They were not massive. That is the first thing to get out of your head. We always imagine early humans as these huge muscular brutes, but Homo erectus was actually pretty average-sized. They range from about 4'9" to 6'1", weight-wise somewhere between 88 and 150 pounds. Now I know what you are thinking, 6'1" and 150 pounds? That is super lean, like that is athlete lean. And you are right. These folks were not bulky. They did not have access to 3 meals a day. They were not lifting weights at the gym. They were lean, tough endurance runners. And yes, I said runners. Homo erectus could run. Really run. Not just jog away from danger, but actually chase down prey for hours. Their body proportions were basically the same as modern humans. Long legs, shorter arms, narrow hips. Everything about their skeleton screams distance runner. We have found their footprints in Kenya, dated to about 1.5 million years ago. And you know what? They walked just like us. Same gait, same stride pattern, same everything. If you saw those footprints without context, you would think a modern human made them. There is even evidence that Homo erectus could throw really well. Their shoulders were built for high-speed throwing, which makes sense when you think about it. If you are hunting big, dangerous animals with primitive weapons, being able to chuck a spear or a rock really hard from a safe distance is a huge advantage. But here is what really gets me about their bodies. They were pretty much hairless, okay? We cannot know this for absolute certain because soft tissue does not fossilize. But genetic analysis of the melanocortin-1 receptor suggests that humans lost most of their body hair about 1.2 million years ago, right in the middle of the Homo erectus time period. Why lose your fur? Why would evolution do that? Well, because they were running. All that endurance running generates a lot of heat. And if you're covered in thick fur, you overheat. But if you are mostly hairless, you can sweat. And sweating is the most efficient cooling system in the animal kingdom. This is huge. This is what let Homo erectus chase down animals until they collapsed from heat stroke. Gazelles and antelope are fast, way faster than any human, but they cannot regulate their body temperature as well as we can. So Homo erectus would just jog after them. Not sprint, just jog. Hour after hour after hour, the animal would run away, then have to stop and rest because it was overheating. Homo erectus would catch up. The animal would run again, stop again. Eventually, after hours of this, the animal would just collapse, too exhausted and overheated to keep going. Then Homo erectus would walk up and finish it off. This hunting strategy is called persistence hunting, and it is still used today by some groups in Africa. The San Bushmen of southern Africa hunt kudu antelope this way. They just chase them until the kudu gives up. But there is a trade-off to being hairless. No fur means your skin is exposed to the sun, and that means you need darker skin to protect against UV radiation. So Homo erectus probably had dark skin, at least the ones living in Africa and other sunny areas. The ones living in Europe and northern Asia, though, they might have had lighter skin, because in higher latitudes you do not get as much sunlight, and you need sunlight to produce vitamin D. So populations living far from the equator probably evolved lighter skin to absorb more UV rays. We actually have evidence of this. A 500,000-year-old Homo erectus skeleton from Turkey shows signs of tuberculosis meningitis. This disease is typically made worse in dark-skinned people living in northern areas because of vitamin D deficiency, which suggests this individual had dark skin despite living in a place where lighter skin would have been better. Maybe they had recently migrated north, or maybe skin colour took a while to adapt. Either way, it shows that Homo erectus was dealing with the same evolutionary pressures we still deal with today. Now let's talk about their heads, because this is where things get really interesting. Homo erectus skulls are distinctive. You would recognize one immediately. They are low and flat with a pronounced brow ridge, like a really pronounced brow ridge. These big chunky ridges of bone sticking out above their eyes. Why the big brows? Well, here is the funny thing. We always ask, why did Homo erectus have such big brows? But actually the better question is, why do not we have them? Because every other great ape has brow ridges. Chimpanzees have them. Gorillas have them. Orangutans have them. We are the weird ones for not having them. The reason we lost them is probably because of social communication. Moving your eyebrows can convey a lot of information. Surprise, confusion, anger, interest. All those tiny facial expressions we use to communicate without words. Brow ridges would limit how much you can move your eyebrows. So as humans became more and more social, we evolved smaller brow ridges to have more expressive faces, but Homo erectus still had them, which suggests their social communication was not as complex as ours. They could probably communicate pretty well, but maybe not with all the subtle facial expressions we use. The brow ridges probably also served as protection. Getting punched in the face hurts less if you have a big ridge of bone protecting your eye sockets. And let's be real. Humans have been getting into fistfights over stupid things for millions of years. There is no reason to think Homo erectus was any different. Their faces were flatter than earlier hominins, more human-looking, but still pretty different from us. And they had noses, like actual projecting noses, not just flat nostrils like chimps. This was probably an adaptation to breathing dry air. A projecting nose helps warm and humidify the air before it reaches your lungs, which is useful if you're running around in dry savanna environments all day. Some scientists think the nose was also useful for figuring out which direction smells were coming from, like a biological GPS for following scent trails. But honestly, humans do not have great sense of smell compared to other animals, so I'm skeptical of this theory. What really matters is their brain. That is where the magic happened. Homo erectus brains averaged 950 cubic centimeters. Some individuals had brains as small as 546. Some had brains as large as 1251. That is a huge range. Way more variation than we see in modern humans. But size is not everything. What matters is the structure of the brain. And Homo erectus brains were definitely more advanced than earlier hominins. Their prefrontal cortex was bigger, though still smaller than ours. This is the part of the brain responsible for planning, decision-making, personality, all the stuff that makes us human. But here is something interesting. A 1-year-old Homo erectus fossil shows that they did not have an extended childhood like we do. Modern human kids take forever to grow up. Our brains keep developing until we are in our 20s. This extended childhood is what allows us to learn so much and develop such complex cognitive abilities. Homo erectus kids grew up faster. which means they probably were not quite as smart as modern humans. They did not have as much time to learn and develop. But they were still way smarter than anything that came before them. Smart enough to make complex tools, smart enough to use fire, smart enough to coordinate hunts and care for their injured and spread across 3 continents. Smart enough to survive for 2 million years. That is pretty dang smart if you ask me. Now let's talk about their teeth, because teeth tell us a lot about diet. Homo erectus had the thinnest tooth enamel of any hominin. Enamel is the hard outer layer that protects your teeth from breaking down. The fact that they had thin enamel tells us something important. They were not eating a lot of hard foods. Earlier hominins like Australopithecus had really thick enamel because they ate hard nuts and seeds and raw tubers, stuff that would crack your teeth if you were not careful. But Homo erectus did not need thick enamel. Why not? Because they were cooking their food and using tools to process it before eating. Fire softens meat and breaks down tough plant fibers. Stone tools can crack open bones to get at the marrow inside. With these technologies, you do not need thick enamel anymore. But their jaws were still pretty strong. The mandible, that's your lower jaw, was thicker than ours, which means they could produce really powerful bite forces. But weirdly, we are not sure what they used this power for. Their teeth could not handle hard foods, but they could definitely chew through tough things. Maybe they were eating a lot of raw meat, dried meat, leather. We do not really know. What we do know is that their diet was way more varied than earlier hominins. They ate meat, bone marrow, fish, turtles, fruits, vegetables, seeds, nuts, tubers. Pretty much anything edible they could get their hands on. And they were not picky about what animals they hunted. Elephants, rhinos, hippos, antelope, wild pigs, even crocodiles and catfish. These folks would eat anything. The big game hunting is what really impresses me though. Taking down an elephant with Stone Age technology is insane. You need multiple people working together. You need strategy and planning. You need someone to distract the elephant while others sneak around and throw spears at it. You need to know where to aim to hit vital organs. This is not simple stuff. This requires intelligence and communication and teamwork. And after you kill the elephant, you need to butcher it. An elephant carcass is massive. You cannot just drag it back to camp. You have to cut it up on site and carry the pieces back. That means stone tools sharp enough to cut through thick hide and muscle. That means knowing how to preserve the meat so it does not spoil. Some researchers think Homo erectus dried their meat to preserve it. Makes sense. If you kill an elephant, there is no way your tribe can eat all of it before it goes bad. So you cut the meat into strips and hang it in the sun to dry. Then you can store it and eat it over the next few weeks. We do not have direct evidence of this. Dried meat does not fossilize. But it is a pretty logical conclusion based on what we know. The bone marrow thing is interesting too. We have lots of evidence that Homo erectus loved bone marrow. They would crack open the long bones of animals to get at the marrow inside. Marrow is full of fat and nutrients, super calorie dense. Eating marrow would have given them a huge energy boost. And here is the thing about bone marrow. Most predators cannot get to it. Lions and hyenas can crunch through smaller bones, but big thick leg bones, they cannot break those open. So after a lion makes a kill and eats the meat, Homo erectus could come along and crack open the bones to get at the marrow. Free calories that no other animal could access. This is called scavenging, and Homo erectus was really good at it. They did not just hunt. They also scavenged fresh kills from other predators and found already dead animals before other scavengers got to them. Being fast endurance runners helped with this too. If you spot a fresh carcass, you need to get there before the vultures and hyenas, and Homo erectus could run for hours without stopping. They would have beaten everyone else to the free meal. So we have talked about what Homo erectus looked like and what they ate. Now we need to talk about their tools, because this is where things get really cool. Homo erectus invented the hand axe. Well, technically it is called an Acheulean hand axe, named after the site in France where they were first discovered. But hand axe is way easier to say. These things were game changers, literally. Before Homo erectus, earlier hominins were making older one tools, simple stone flakes. You take one rock, smash it against another rock, and use the sharp flake to cut stuff. Basic, but effective. But hand axes, these were on another level. They were symmetrical. They had a teardrop shape. They were worked on both sides, bifacially, which means you had to carefully chip away at the stone from both faces to create the desired shape. This requires planning. You have to visualize what the final tool will look like before you start making it. You have to know which pieces to chip off and in what order. This is not easy. I have tried making stone tools before, and let me tell you, it is way harder than it looks. You have to hit the stone at just the right angle, with just the right amount of force. Too hard and you shatter the whole thing. Too soft and nothing happens. And you have to do this dozens of times to create one hand axe. Homo erectus got really good at this. We find hand axes all over the old world. Africa, Europe, Asia. And here is the crazy part. They all look basically the same. Same size, same shape, same technique. That means one of two things. Either the hand axe design was invented once and then spread through migration and teaching, or Homo erectus independently invented the same tool design multiple times in different places. Either option is impressive. If it spread through teaching, that means they had cultural transmission. Knowledge being passed from one generation to the next, from one group to another. That is language, or at least proto-language. If they invented it multiple times independently, that means they were smart enough to converge on the same optimal tool design through trial and error. That is problem solving. That is innovation. My bet is on the first option, cultural transmission. Because we see these hand axes showing up in new areas at specific times, spreading outward from Africa. That suggests migration, not independent invention. But either way, hand axes dominated Stone Age technology for over 1 million years. Think about that. One tool design, used continuously for 1 million years. No major changes, no big innovations. Just hand axes, hand axes, hand axes. That is actually kind of weird when you think about it. Modern humans invent new things constantly. Every generation has new tools, new technologies. But Homo erectus stuck with the same design for 1 million years. Was it because they were not innovative enough to improve it? Or was it because the hand axe was already so good that it did not need improving? I think it is the second one. A good hand axe can do almost anything. Cut meat, scrape hides, chop wood, dig for tubers, maybe even kill animals if you use it like a knife. It is the ultimate multi-tool, the Swiss Army knife of the Stone Age. Why fix what is not broken? But they did not only make hand axes. We have found evidence of wooden spears, bone tools, even shell tools. The problem is that most of this stuff does not survive. Wood rots. Bone breaks down. Only stone lasts forever, so we probably are missing a huge part of the Homo erectus toolkit. Who knows what else they were making? Baskets, rope, clothing, wooden clubs, fishing nets. None of that would fossilize, and so it would all be gone. But we do have one amazing piece of evidence, an 800,000-year-old bone point from Africa. This thing has barbs carved into it. 3 distinct barbs, carefully shaped. Barbed points are complex. You do not need barbs to kill something. A simple sharp point works fine, but barbs make the point harder to remove once it goes in, which is useful if you are hunting fish. Fish are slippery. They can wiggle off a smooth spear point, but barbs, those hook in. The fish is stuck. This suggests Homo erectus was spear fishing, and they were good enough at it to invest time and effort into making specialized fishing gear. If they could make barbed bone points 800,000 years ago, what else were they making? Were they carving wood? Making bone spearheads for big game hunting? Creating specialized tools for different tasks? We just do not know, and that drives me crazy. Now let's talk about fire, because fire is huge. Fire is maybe the most important technology in human history. The earliest evidence of fire used by hominins is controversial. We have some sites showing burned sediments dating back 1.7 million years. But we cannot prove humans made those fires. They could have been natural wildfires. By 1.5 million years ago, we start seeing more and more sites with evidence of fire. Burned bones, fire-cracked rocks, ash deposits. It is becoming more common. And by 1 million years ago, controlled use of fire is pretty much accepted by everyone. Homo erectus definitely had fire by this point, probably earlier. But how did they get it? The first fires were probably natural. A lightning strike starts a bushfire. Homo erectus sees it and approaches after it dies down. They find cooked animals in the ashes. The meat tastes amazing, way better than raw meat. Easier to chew, easier to digest. So they start seeking out fires. Whenever they see smoke, they go investigate. Maybe they start keeping embers alive, carrying them from place to place. You can keep a fire going indefinitely if you keep adding fuel and never let it completely go out. Eventually, probably, they figured out how to start fires themselves. We do not know exactly when this happened, but Neanderthals definitely could start fires using flint and pyrite, and Neanderthals descended from Homo erectus. So it is reasonable to think that late-period Homo erectus could start fires too. Maybe not all populations, maybe only some groups figured it out. But the technology was there. Fire changes everything. It makes food more digestible, which means you get more calories from the same amount of food. It destroys pathogens, which means less food poisoning. It provides warmth, which means you can survive in colder climates. It provides light, which means you can stay active after dark, and it scares away predators. Lions and hyenas are terrified of fire. They will not come near it. So a campfire is basically a force field that keeps dangerous animals away while you sleep. Fire also brings people together. You sit around the fire at night. You share food. You tell stories. You bond as a group. Fire creates community. This might be why Homo erectus was so successful at caring for their sick and elderly. Fire created a gathering place where the whole tribe came together every night. A place where the old, toothless man could sit and be part of the group, even if he could not hunt anymore. A place where the injured child could rest while others told stories and shared food. Fire made Homo erectus more human. But we still have not answered the biggest question. How did Homo erectus spread so far so fast? By 1.8 million years ago, they were already in Indonesia. That is thousands of miles from Africa. And Indonesia is a bunch of islands. Islands that were never connected to mainland Asia, even during ice ages when sea levels were lower. So how did they get there? Some of those islands are separated by more than 15 miles of open ocean. You cannot swim that far. Well, professional swimmers with training and preparation might be able to do it. But the average person, no way. Maybe 1 or 2 miles on a good day, and you cannot swim 15 miles with kids, or elderly people, or pregnant women, or your tools and supplies. So if Homo erectus did not swim, how did they cross the ocean? Boats. They must have made boats. Now, before you say that is crazy, hear me out. We have evidence of Homo erectus on multiple islands that have never been connected to the mainland. Flores, famous for being home to the tiny Homo floresiensis, the hobbits, Luzon in the Philippines, possibly even Crete in the Mediterranean. These islands have hand axes and other stone tools dated to hundreds of thousands of years ago. Tools that were almost certainly made by Homo erectus, or one of their close relatives. So boats are the only explanation. They had to have made some kind of watercraft. What did these boats look like? We have no idea. Wood does not fossilize well, especially in tropical environments, so we will probably never find an actual Homo erectus boat. But we can speculate. The simplest boat is just a log. Find a big buoyant log, hold on to it, kick your feet, and you can cross a decent distance of water. Multiple logs lashed together would work even better. Reed boats are also possible. You bundle together reeds or other plant material into a boat shape. Ancient Egyptians made reed boats. People in South America made reed boats. It is a pretty universal technology. Or maybe they made dugout canoes. You burn and scrape out the inside of a log to create a hollow vessel. This takes a long time, even with modern steel tools. But with stone tools and fire, it would take weeks. But it is possible. Whatever they used, it worked. They crossed significant stretches of open ocean, multiple times, in different locations around the world. That is incredible. That shows planning, coordination, skill. You cannot just throw a boat together and hope for the best. You need to test it. You need to practice. You need to pick a calm day and a safe route. This suggests Homo erectus had some form of language. Real language, not just grunts and gestures, because coordinating a sea voyage requires communication. You need to discuss the plan, assign roles, warn each other about dangers. The hyoid bone is important here. This is a bone in your throat that anchors the muscles involved in speech. Modern humans have a very specific hyoid shape that allows for complex speech. We have a 400,000-year-old Homo erectus hyoid from Italy. It is bar-shaped, more similar to other Homo species than to apes. But it is different from the modern human hyoid. It lacks the muscle attachments we have, so Homo erectus probably could not speak like we do. Not with the same range and complexity, but they definitely had some form of proto-language. Basic framework that later evolved into full language in later human species. A 530,000-year-old Homo heidelbergensis hyoid is basically identical to ours. So by that point, full speech capability had evolved, and heidelbergensis descended from erectus. So somewhere between 1 million years ago and 500,000 years ago, human speech went from basic proto-language to something approaching modern language. That is a huge leap. But even basic proto-language would be enough to coordinate sea voyages, enough to plan hunts, enough to teach tool-making, enough to tell the tribe to take care of the old toothless man because he is valuable, because he is one of us. Language makes us human, and Homo erectus had the beginnings of it. We also have some evidence of art from Homo erectus. Not much, because most art from that time period would not survive, but we do have a few examples. A shell with geometric engravings 546,000 years old. Zigzag lines carved into the surface. This is the oldest known example of deliberate engraving, the oldest art. Some people argue it is not really art. Maybe it was just doodling. Maybe it was practicing tool-making techniques. But I think it is art, because it serves no practical purpose. It is decoration. It is someone expressing themselves creatively. We also have possible Venus figurines, small stones that naturally resemble human shapes, but were slightly modified to emphasize features like the head and limbs. Maybe these were dolls or religious objects, or maybe they were just interesting rocks someone picked up. And we have evidence of ochre use. Ochre is a red, yellow or brown pigment made from clay and minerals. We find ochre chunks at Homo erectus sites going back 1.4 million years. What were they using it for? Body paint? Decorating objects? Religious rituals? We do not know. But collecting and using pigments suggests symbolic thinking. It suggests creativity. It suggests that Homo erectus cared about more than just survival. They had culture. They had art. They had identity. They were human. We need to talk about how Homo erectus actually lived day to day, their social structure, their homes, how they organized themselves as a group. And the truth is, we do not know that much. Social behavior does not fossilize. You cannot dig up evidence of friendships or rivalries or who was in charge. We have to make educated guesses based on the limited evidence we have. But we do have some clues. In Kenya, researchers found 97 footprints dating back 1.5 million years, all made at the same time, probably within a few hours. And when they analysed the footprints, they found something interesting. At least 20 individuals, all walking in the same direction, and based on the size of the footprints, almost all of them were male. What does that mean? Well, it suggests some kind of task group, maybe a hunting party going after big game, maybe a border patrol checking the edges of their territory. Maybe a group of men travelling to a different camp to trade or socialise. Whatever it was, it shows division of labour. The men doing one thing while the women and children were doing something else. This is a pattern we see in modern hunter-gatherer societies. Men often focus on big risky prey, while women focus on gathering plants and hunting smaller animals. Why? Because hunting big game has a low success rate. You might spend days tracking an elephant and come home empty-handed, but gathering plants is reliable. You can always find something edible, so it makes sense to have some people doing the risky high-reward hunting, while others do the safe, reliable gathering. This keeps the tribe fed even when hunts fail, and hunts did fail, probably a lot. Hunting is hard. Hunting with Stone Age technology is even harder. So having a mixed strategy, some people hunting big game and some people gathering, would have been essential for survival. But this also suggests that Homo erectus had complex social structures. They were not just random groups of people doing whatever. They had roles. They had coordination. They worked together. We also know they made shelters. Not everywhere, but in some places. In Tanzania, researchers found a circle of volcanic rocks arranged in a specific pattern. The rocks were probably used to hold down poles stuck into the ground. The poles would have supported some kind of roof or walls, maybe made from branches and animal hides. This is speculative. Rocks can arrange themselves in circles naturally, but the pattern is pretty convincing, and it makes sense that Homo erectus would build shelters when they needed to. In Europe, we have evidence of more substantial structures. The oldest known dwelling in Europe comes from the Czech Republic, dated to 700,000 years ago. Again, we do not have the actual structure, just the post holes and debris that suggest a structure was there, and we have lots of evidence of cave use, though interestingly cave use does not become common until about 600,000 years ago. Before that, Homo erectus seems to have preferred open-air sites. Maybe caves were already occupied by other animals. Cave bears, cave lions, hyenas. These are dangerous animals. You do not want to fight a cave bear for its home. Better to build your own shelter outside. Or maybe Homo erectus just did not like living in caves. Caves can be dark, damp, cold. Not the most pleasant places to live if you have other options. But in harsh climates, caves are lifesavers. They provide shelter from wind and rain. They trap heat from fires. They are defensible against predators. So as Homo erectus spread into colder regions, caves became more important. The oldest cave site is Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa, dated to 1.6 million years ago. This cave has evidence of fire use, stone tools, and lots of animal bones. Homo erectus was definitely living here, at least part-time. But I do not think they lived in caves full-time. More likely they used caves seasonally. When the weather was bad, they would hole up in a cave. When the weather was good, they would camp outside near water sources and good hunting grounds. This nomadic lifestyle makes sense for a hunter-gatherer society. You follow the herds. You move to where the food is. You do not stay in one place year-round unless you have agriculture, and Homo erectus definitely did not have agriculture. So what did a typical Homo erectus group look like? Probably 20 to 50 individuals, big enough to defend against predators and hunt large game, but small enough to find sufficient food. They probably moved around within a specific territory, following seasonal patterns. Multiple groups would have known about each other. Maybe they met up occasionally to trade, share information, or find mates. Interbreeding between groups would have been important to avoid inbreeding and maintain genetic diversity. There was probably some violence between groups, competition for resources, territorial disputes, kidnapping, raids. We see this in all hunter-gatherer societies. Homo erectus was probably no different. But within a group, cooperation was essential. You cannot survive alone. You need others to help you hunt, defend against predators, care for your children, share food during lean times. And we know Homo erectus cooperated because they cared for their injured and elderly. Multiple fossils show evidence of serious injuries or disabilities that would have required help from others to survive. The toothless old man I mentioned earlier, the child with spinal problems, the kid with the brain deformity. All of these individuals survived for years with conditions that would have been debilitating. That takes a village, literally. Someone had to feed the toothless man soft food. Someone had to carry the kid with spinal problems when the tribe moved camp. Someone had to watch the child with the brain deformity to make sure they did not wander off and get hurt. This is humanity at its core. Not the strongest or the smartest, but the most caring, the most willing to help each other. And this is what makes the extinction of Homo erectus so sad, because by 100,000 years ago they were gone. After nearly 2 million years of success, they vanished. We have already talked about some of the reasons: climate change, competition with other human species, absorption through interbreeding. But I want to dig deeper into what actually happened during their final days. The climate changed dramatically around 100,000 years ago. The Earth was entering an ice age. Temperatures were dropping, especially in northern regions. Sea levels were falling as water got locked up in glaciers. Ecosystems were shifting. Homo erectus had survived ice ages before, but this time might have been different, because this time they were not alone. Modern Homo sapiens were spreading out of Africa. We were smarter, more adaptable, more innovative. We had better tools, better weapons, better strategies, and we were hungry for resources. When two species compete for the same resources, usually one of them loses. It is called competitive exclusion. The species that is even slightly better at acquiring resources will gradually outcompete the other species until the inferior species goes extinct. And sadly, Homo erectus was the inferior species, not by much, but enough. We were better hunters. We could make projectile weapons like atlatls and eventually bows and arrows. We could kill animals from a distance without putting ourselves in danger. We were better gatherers. We had more advanced tools for digging roots and processing tough plants. We could extract more calories from the same environment. We had better social structures. Full language let us coordinate more effectively, share knowledge more efficiently, form larger and more complex societies. Homo erectus could not keep up. Slowly, population by population, they started disappearing. First from Africa, then from Europe, then from the Middle East, finally from Southeast Asia. Java was their last stand. The latest Homo erectus fossils we have are from Java, dated to about 100,000 years ago. Maybe they survived a bit longer, but we have no evidence. And then they were gone. Or were they? Because here is the thing. We do not really know what happened to the last populations of Homo erectus. Did they go extinct? Or did they interbreed with modern humans and Neanderthals and Denisovans until their genes were so diluted that they effectively disappeared as a distinct species? Probably both. Some populations probably did go extinct, especially isolated ones that never encountered other human species, but others probably interbred, and their genes, their adaptations, their 2 million years of survival experience, all of that got absorbed into the broader human gene pool. We cannot test this yet. We do not have good enough DNA samples from Homo erectus fossils. DNA degrades over time, and after hundreds of thousands of years, there is not much left. But we know we interbred with Neanderthals. We know we interbred with Denisovans, and both of those species descended from Homo erectus. So logically, we probably interbred with erectus too, which means they are not really extinct. They are just part of us now. But still, the last pure Homo erectus populations vanishing from the earth after nearly 2 million years of dominance, that is heartbreaking. They did not fail. They were not weak or stupid or inferior. They were incredible. They were pioneers. They were survivors. They invented technologies that would be used for over 1,000,000 years. They spread across the entire Old World. They adapted to every environment imaginable. They were successful beyond anything we can comprehend. 2,000,000 years. No other human species even comes close. But in the end, success was not enough. The world changed. New competition arrived, and flexibility beat specialization. Homo erectus was a master of one way of life. Modern humans were adaptable to any way of life. And when those two species met, there was only one possible outcome. But you know what bothers me about the whole extinction narrative? We frame it like a failure, like Homo erectus lost some kind of competition, and that is why they are gone. But surviving for 2,000,000 years is not a failure. That is an extraordinary success. Modern Homo sapiens have been around for 300,000 years. We think we are hot stuff because we invented computers and went to the moon. But we have not even hit a quarter of Homo erectus's track record yet. And who knows if we will make it another 1,000,000 years. Given how things are going, I would not bet on it. So maybe we should not be asking why Homo erectus went extinct. Maybe we should be asking how they survived so long. What was their secret? I think it comes down to a few things. First, they were generalists. They could eat almost anything. Plants, meat, fish, insects. They lived in tropical forests, open savannas, temperate woodlands, even cold steppe environments. They could hunt big game, but they could also gather plants and scavenge. This flexibility in diet and habitat meant they could survive almost anywhere. Second, they were socially cooperative. They cared for each other. They shared food. They worked together to hunt and defend their territory. This social cohesion made them stronger than the sum of their parts. Third, they were just tough. They could run for hours. They could survive injuries that would kill most animals. They could adapt to new environments. They were resilient. And fourth, they were innovative. Not as innovative as modern humans, but way more innovative than anything that came before them. They invented new tools, they discovered fire, they built boats, they created art. They were constantly problem-solving. Put all that together and you get a species that could weather almost any storm. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, droughts, floods. Homo erectus survived it all. Until they could not. And I think that is the real lesson here. No matter how successful you are, no matter how well adapted, no matter how tough, eventually something comes along that you cannot handle. Maybe it is climate change. Maybe it is competition. Maybe it is just bad luck. Nothing lasts forever. Not even the most successful species on Earth. But Homo erectus came pretty dang close. There is something I have been thinking about a lot while researching Homo erectus. Something that keeps bugging me. We tend to view human evolution as this linear progression. Apes to Australopithecus, to Homo habilis, to Homo erectus to us. Each species getting smarter, more advanced, more human. Like evolution is a ladder we are climbing towards some ultimate destination. But that is not how evolution works. Evolution is not a ladder, it is a bush. A tangled, messy bush with branches going in every direction. Some branches grow long and flourish, others get cut short, but there is no ultimate goal, no final destination. There is just adaptation to whatever environment you find yourself in. Homo erectus was not a step on the way to us. They were their own thing, their own success story. They had been around for nearly 2,000,000 years when our ancestors were just getting started. To them, we would have looked like the newcomers. The young upstarts who showed up and started competing for resources, and in a way, we were the problem, not them. They had created a stable, successful way of life. They had perfected the art of being Homo erectus. 2 million years of evolution had shaped them into exactly what they needed to be. They were the Michael Jordan of early humans, at the absolute peak of their game. But the game changed, and suddenly being the best at the old game did not matter anymore. I think about this a lot in terms of modern life too. How often do we see people or companies or even entire industries that were super successful for a long time, and then suddenly they are not? Not because they got worse, but because the world around them changed and they could not adapt fast enough. Blockbuster Video was not a bad company. They were incredibly successful for decades, but then streaming showed up and they could not pivot fast enough. Now they are gone. Nokia made great phones. They dominated the mobile phone market. Then smartphones happened and they missed the boat. Now they are basically irrelevant. This is what happened to Homo erectus. They were not failures. The world just changed faster than they could adapt. And here is the weird thing. That toothless old man sitting by the fire, the one who was being cared for by his tribe, he represents both Homo erectus's greatest strength and their ultimate weakness. Their greatest strength was their compassion, their ability to care for each other, to work together, to form strong social bonds. This is what let them survive for so long. This is what made them human. But it was also a weakness, because caring for the old and the sick and the injured takes resources that could be used for other things. And when resources get scarce, when competition gets fierce, the species that can move fast and travel light has an advantage. Modern humans were younger, more aggressive, more willing to take risks. We did not have 2 million years of tradition weighing us down. We could try new things, fail, learn, adapt. We were scrappy. Homo erectus had all this institutional knowledge, all these successful strategies that had worked for millions of years. Why would they change? Why would they try something new when the old ways had always worked before? But the old ways stopped working. And by the time they realized that, it was too late. This is the tragedy of Homo erectus. They were too successful for their own good. There is a concept in evolutionary biology called an evolutionary trap. It is when the cues that used to indicate fitness or survival no longer work because the environment has changed. So animals keep following the same strategies that used to work, but now those strategies lead to failure. Moths flying into light bulbs is an example. For millions of years, moths used light sources like the moon to navigate. Flying at an angle to the light kept them going in a straight line. But then humans invented artificial lights, and suddenly that navigation strategy leads moths to fly in circles around the bulb until they die. The strategy did not change. The environment changed, and the moths could not adapt fast enough. Homo erectus flew into the light bulb. Their successful strategies stopped working, but they kept using them anyway. Because how do you abandon something that has worked for 2 million years? You cannot. Not easily. Not without some serious evolutionary pressure forcing you to change. And maybe they just did not have time. Maybe modern humans showed up too fast, competed too hard, spread too quickly. Maybe if they had been given another 100,000 years, they would have adapted and survived. Or maybe not. Maybe their fate was sealed the moment more flexible, more innovative humans appeared? We will never know. But what we do know is that Homo erectus was not some primitive beast. They were people, real people with thoughts and feelings and hopes and fears. They loved their families, they told stories around the fire, they laughed and cried and mourned their dead. They were us. Or at least they were what we used to be, what we came from. And in a very real sense, they never went extinct. Because we carry their genes, we use their tools, we live by their innovations, we inherited everything they learned over 2 million years of survival. Fire? That is a Homo erectus innovation. Hunting big game, Homo erectus pioneered that. Taking care of the elderly and disabled, Homo erectus did that. Spreading across the entire old world, Homo erectus did it first. We are standing on the shoulders of giants, and those giants are Homo erectus. So when I think about why Homo erectus went extinct, I do not see it as a failure. I see it as a transformation. They did not die, they evolved, they became us. Their story is our story, their DNA is our DNA. The old man sitting by the fire, being fed by his tribe, living out his final years surrounded by people who cared about him. That is the legacy of Homo erectus. That is what they gave us. Compassion, cooperation, humanity. And that is worth more than 2 million years of survival. That is immortality. Homo erectus is not extinct. They are right here. In every act of kindness, in every moment we choose to help someone who cannot help themselves, in every time we come together to solve a problem or face a challenge. That is Homo erectus. That is their gift to us. And as long as we remember that, as long as we carry that forward, they will never truly be gone. So here is to Homo erectus, the most successful human species that ever lived, the pioneers, the survivors, the compassionate ones who cared for their old and their sick and their injured, the ones who spread across 3 continents and survived ice ages and climate shifts and predators and everything else. The world threw at them for nearly 2 million years. We owe them everything, and I hope, wherever we end up as a species, whether we survive another 2 million years or whether we flame out in the next few centuries, I hope we can live up to their example. I hope we can be as resilient, as adaptive, as compassionate, as human as they were, because that is what it means to be Homo erectus. That is what it means to be human. And that is a legacy worth preserving. You know what really gets me. We spent over a century studying Homo erectus, and we still have so much to learn. Every new discovery changes what we thought we knew. Every new fossil adds another piece to the puzzle. Just recently, researchers re-examined some of the Peking man fossils and found cut marks on the bones, evidence that Homo erectus might have practiced cannibalism. Now, before you get grossed out, this does not necessarily mean they were eating each other for fun. It could have been ritual cannibalism, honouring the dead by consuming them, or it could have been survival cannibalism during desperate times. We do not know, and that is the frustrating part. There is so much we will never know about these people. How did they think? What did they believe? What were their daily lives actually like? We can make educated guesses based on fossils and tools and modern hunter-gatherer societies, but we will never truly know. All we have are these fragments, these tiny glimpses into their lives, a tooth here, a stone tool there, some footprints frozen in mud, and from these fragments we try to reconstruct an entire species that existed for 2 million years. It is like trying to understand modern human civilization by looking at only a handful of artifacts from different time periods. You would miss so much. The art, the music, the literature, the relationships, the emotions, all the things that make us human but do not leave fossils. Homo erectus had all of that too. They had culture and traditions and stories passed down through generations. They had inside jokes and favourite hunting spots and memories of people who had died. They had loves and losses and triumphs and failures. They were not just primitive humans making stone tools. They were people living full, complex lives. And that is what I want you to take away from this. When you hear about Homo erectus or any other extinct human species, do not think of them as some inferior version of us. Think of them as people. Different from us in some ways, but human in all the ways that matter. They loved their children. They grieved their dead. They helped each other through hard times. They celebrated successful hunts and told stories around the fire and found joy in being alive. They were human as you or me. And they deserve to be remembered not as failures or evolutionary dead ends, but as the incredible, resilient, compassionate people they were. So the next time you hear about Homo erectus going extinct, remember the old man by the fire. Remember the tribe that cared for him, even when he could no longer hunt or contribute. Remember that humanity is not about being the strongest or the smartest. It is about being there for each other. It is about caring. It is about surviving together. That is the legacy of Homo erectus, and it is